I think about it more now than I did in my younger years.
He was very reluctant to tell me certain stories. I tried to, I guess, etch it out of him, but it's tough at times, and I still haven't gotten the full story. I have more of the general, I guess, superficial story that he tells people, and it's hard to really uncover those deeper secrets or those deeper feelings.
We were always close with many of the survivors. That was our social group and our family, Jill's parents. So in conversation, it came up many times about what they had gone through, and the children had heard, but they weren't aware of what was really discussed. And then as they grew older, I started to tell them a little bit about what their father had experienced, and they wanted to know more, and gradually I pulled him into the conversation. He was very reluctant at first. Then as they became teenagers and he became involved with the Holocaust here, he started to speak publicly with children, and our son became more aware, and he sat in on some of the lectures and heard about it, and in time they really became totally aware of what went on. Then we wrote out his story, and they became very knowledgeable about it too.
I did feel a need to actively seek out various means to continue to pass on these stories and to understand them at a different level. And I think it's important, extremely important. It's part of who I am, and it's part of what I want to pass on to the next generation.
We had to be quiet. We had to not much movement. And what we did for the 2 years, I'm trying to remember. It was just, most of the time I remember is delight ourselves. Because we wore the same clothes. We had no clothes.
There were about 500,000 Jews living in Germany in 1933. Like the Jews in many Western European nations, German Jews often adopted the culture, but not the religion of their non-Jewish neighbors. But the largest Jewish population was in Eastern Europe, where many lived in Jewish towns.
I was born in Poland, a little village or town. It's called Markowa. It was a heavily populated town, I would say approximately 3,000 people. And as far as the Jewish families, I would say about 25 families, a total of 150, to my knowledge, because at that time I was, 8 to 9 years old. When the war broke out, it was 1939. I was 10 years old. And we had a nice home, large home. And my parents were all involved in businesses. My father had 3 different businesses. In the winter, he was dealing with cattle. In the summer, in the spring, he purchased orchards in bloom. And in the fall, he harvested. He was exporting, as far as I can remember. I heard him mention Czechoslovakia, Germany, and so on. And my mother was in the material business, selling materials. And we had a store, so my grandmother looked after the store. And most of the time, my parents were away, and myself and 2 younger sisters were looking after the home, and the animals, which is chickens, all poultry, all kinds. We had everything. Things changed pretty well right away. It was also, we had a lot of problems of people at night drunk and try to make mischief, We had to protect our windows, with these wooden big stone shutters, yes, for protection. They didn't bother us physically, but as a child, I remember I went to school, and was called names. Anti-Semitism was before the war, much before the war, and then when the war broke out, so I guess the Polish, the anti-Semites had a free hand, you know. Right away, the Germans, as soon as they came in, they rounded up pretty well the Jews and took them to labor camps or like places they had the Auschwitz, you know, whatever it is. Yeah. And where we were, they sort of left us alone for 1942. As soon as they came in, and for any reason, I still can't figure it out why, the first group of Germans walked into our home and they say that we want space, which was just ordinary soldiers, officers. And so we couldn't say no, so they occupied mostly of our home, and they gave us one room in the kitchen, and that was it. But they were fine. They cooked their own meals, and they didn't bother us, and they stayed there for many weeks. And then they were leaving, and so we asked him, "Where are you going?" He says, he broke up in tears. He says, "We go into the Russian front." That was in 1941, you see. And they said goodbye, just like family. Yes. And then after they left, there's another group came in, was the Gestapo. Well, that was already a different situation with them. They were pretty rude, you know, rough, you know, but they didn't hurt us. And we had to work for them and clean their equipment and do whatever they wanted to do for them, you see. And then we had to go in the wintertime, shovel snow on the highways because they didn't have the equipment to do it. They didn't provide no food, nothing, just walking through the fields, you know, until you hit the highway and come back. And this has been going on, you know, through the winter. They also left after a while. Then the third group was the SS. Now they were pretty rough, especially to my father. They were kicking him, you know, if their boots were not lined up, you know, just evenly. That's not the way I left them, you know, blah blah. But didn't bother us as far as children, you see. So we were pretty frightened already with them. And as a child, at that time, 11 or 12, I didn't understand too much about it, and I don't think so. My parents tried to explain too much either, you know. And they also left. Shortly after, there's a knock at the door, and we see two Polish policemen coming in. And they say, I don't remember what they called him in Polish. My father's name was Jacob. He says, "Please," he says, "you have to leave right away. We have orders to round up the whole village, the Jewish people, round them up into such a place. Please leave if you want to be saved." So they gave us 5 minutes. So what can you take in 5 minutes? So we left. There was a road, a lane, going into a hill, into the fields. And this is the first thing you think. You hide in the fields. And that was late spring, early summer, and we had to be careful not to be seen, you know. The people work on the fields. So we were lying down on a field between potato rows, you know, and corn rows, which were really that high. And during the day, we were lying there, and at night, we tried to strain ourselves out, and my mother was going looking for food. Till she came to that door, to that bar, family. And that took about 6 weeks, and she pleaded with her, you know, I says, please, and save us, and the war is not going to last that long, you know, maybe weeks or month, and whatever we owe is going to be yours, okay? We'll compensate for it. So that's not the issue, you know. So eventually she had to ask her husband, and he wasn't that, you know, crazy about it. And they have a daughter at that time at 17, 18 years old. So she says, okay. But it was only, she'll take the three of us, myself and my parents, because my mother found a place for the two sisters somewhere else. So we were separated for a few weeks, I would say. So we took us in, and we stayed on the attic there, and we had to be quiet, because, you know, those homes were not built tight, you know. There was spaces between the roof and the house, you know, that openings, you know. Yeah, open areas. And the kitchen door also, didn't close because it was old, and the remote kind of house. Once a day, the daughter was climbing a ladder, ordinary ladder going up with a bucket of potatoes of what, mainly water and maybe a few potatoes mixed up, and half a slice of they bake bread once a month, I think, and half a slice for each person. They were rationing our food. And also taking away the waste. We had to be quiet, we had to not much movement. And what we did for the 2 years, I'm trying to remember. It was just, most of the time I remember is delight ourselves. Because we wore the same clothes. We had no clothes. Two close calls. This happened once. They went to church on a Sunday, regular, and the priest made an announcement, after the services on the pulpit there that says, as soon as the services are finished, he says, I am making an announcement. There's 2 families unaccounted for in this town, and we must find them. And organizing groups in certain areas, and start searching the homes. You can imagine his situation when he heard that. He cannot just leave and run. He had to act normally as if nothing happens. And he came down, but he was smart. You see, I'll track back here. He heard all these different situations, that he was in danger if he was found. So he had to think of something of a secure us better, because we were exposed. All you had to do is just go up on a ladder. We were all, open. You see. So he had a basement. It's called a cellar there, and there was a trap door and a stairway case going down, and a shelf facing in the front. You had their liquor, And on one side, on the right-hand side, there was potatoes. And on the other side, they had the beets for the animals, you see. And that's all the whole cellar contained of. No lights. And he says he has to build some kind of a hiding place. So he emptied out half of the potatoes. I don't know how he did it. It was beyond me. The space was so limited. And he supported a wall. Just... you have a little table in the kitchen, maybe a little larger, same height, bit of ceiling and a wall, and just enough for 5 people to crawl in there. And then he covered up back with potatoes. All he left is a board or 2 boards open, just in case an emergency. Boom, away we go, and we jump in there. So when he heard that, we had that ready, and I think we had some kind of a signal, I don't remember, for an emergency thing. Says, okay, it says, whatever it was, run down quickly. We all went down and covered us up, and that was it. It took 2 hours. We could hear the dogs barking, really barking, because I don't know how many people they were. They came to the door, and naturally he opened on me. He was a tall person, as you can see from the picture. His voice was very strong, loud, you see, as a tall, big man. And they knocked at the door, and he opened up. He says, Joseph, he says, I guess you know why we're here. He says, yes, I heard in the church. He says, well, do you have any Jews here? He says, no. He says, can we look? He says, sure. And the house was nothing there. There was one room on the left side where the daughter was sleeping, and then there was a little storage room on the same side, and the opposite was the kitchen and one bedroom for them. There was mud floors, So there's not much to look at. And then, of course, the attic and the basement. I guess they went upstairs. And then, can we go in the basement? So he opens up the door, the trap door, and he goes first. See how bright he was. And he goes down and gives him the attention, takes the attention to that shelf. He says, you see, all these bottles. I just made that a few weeks ago, and I found a new recipe, and it's just absolute terrific. Would you like to try it? Well, I don't know if they tried it or not. You see, I heard conversation, and that took maybe a minute. I don't think so. It took any longer than 2 minutes, you see. And they walked away. I don't know if they had flashlights over there then, those years. I don't know. It was dark. Once the trap door is open, so the light, you get some light. But you can imagine, my younger sisters were younger. The younger sister was, 12, 13. I was, I'd say, 10. If she would have coughed or sneezed or scared or cried, he would have been finished. That happened in, let's say, in 1944, and it was really getting close, and we could hear the firing really close up. And they went to the field just like every morning. And all of a sudden, these cannons flying over the roof. We were scared because it could catch fire, so we went downstairs. And this took a whole day of this shooting, and there was a valley there, and the Germans sort of stopped right there, and they were defending themselves all night. And we were pretty scared, you see. And in the morning, silence. About late in the morning, they come in, and it says, Jacob and Ita, you are free.
The Nazis killed 3.5 million Jews and tens of thousands of other people at their 6 death camps, all located in occupied Poland. Workers at the operational Reinhardt camps, which included Treblinka, Belzec, and Sobibor, were responsible for the deaths of 1.7 million Jews, the vast majority of whom were Polish. More than 1 million died at Auschwitz.
The Germans left, the Russians are here, you can go. So you can imagine, the hugging, the kissing, and we left. I came out, I couldn't walk. From not moving around, so my knees, my legs swell up. So I was holding on to my parents, And it was about 2-3 kilometers, to our home. Going through, trying not to be seen as well, going through it between the houses, there's a lot of wood, and there was a little river there, so we walked through that area. We came to our home, knocked at the door, and we knew that somebody's occupying our home because we were getting reports. And we told them, introduced ourselves, so-and-so, this is our home, and we survived the war, and please be free to stay with us. The house is big enough for all of us. I remember those words. Whether this happened the same day or the next day, I don't remember. They took off, whoever was there. I don't know how many people, I don't remember that either. So we were left alone, fine. So my father tried to do what he was doing, and don't remember exactly how long we stayed in our home. I don't think it was too long, within a month. One night, somebody's knocking the door about midnight. We had we had to have these securities, heavy European doors with these locks, because for safety, you see. And they knocked at the door, and my father was very cautious man. He was a pretty strong man too, and he didn't like that situation when he heard, and they called him by name. So he unlocked the door and sort of opened up that much and put his foot against it, and he sees a gun facing him. He said, "Open the door." And he just slammed that door, locked it, and he ran out through the back door, through a window, I think. He couldn't open the door, whatever it was. He smashed the window. In his pajamas, he just took off. And naturally, my mother, my sister, everybody's screaming, yelling, crying, We didn't see him for 2 days. He came back. He was so frightened that I don't know where he was, and he came back, and he just says, we got to leave. Simple as this. My mother tried to find families, which we had in New York, and in Canada, and in Argentina, and nobody really responded too much till finally from Canada, a relative, a distant relative, responded a little bit, but nothing happened, and we had to leave. And we had to do that, so we had to go all the way to Austria to come to a camp there, this place, camp for people, and from there he applied a special visa to go wherever he wanted to go. Finally, the relatives sent us papers, and and came to Canada. We did not talk about it, in the family, because we were together, we knew what was happening. We were busy concentrating to get our lives together. As I said, the next day, we already had jobs. My father, my mother, myself, and my sisters. And we worked. We didn't care how much they paid us. I was earning, I think, $18 or $17.50 a week. It was fine. Well, I wanted to get experience because I never worked.
The Holocaust's impact lives on. In that way, the past is always present in the lives of the survivors, but the effect of the Holocaust resonate with the survivors' children and grandchildren. The characteristics of survivors and how they passed on their misplaced youth share a great deal in common. Overprotection, push to higher education, extreme cleanliness, abundance of food, and an instilled sense of Jewish heritage and traditions are common threads. They're shared by survivors' children. But more importantly, there was silence. Silence about what had happened to them until recently. Interestingly, it generally has been the grandchildren that have prompted their survivor grandparents to speak out on the horrors of the past.
As a kid, I guess I didn't really know a lot, and I wasn't as interested until I grew up a little later, when I was in my teenage years. He used to go on tour with Shelley Faintuck, who was the organizer of this program, to various high schools and even elementary schools, and they used to talk about their Holocaust experience to like a group of the kids in like a gymnasium. And I used to go on tour every summer with my Zeta and listen to that account being told to the kids, and then how the kids responded. So that was my first real taste of his experiences itself. And then I started to ask more questions personally at home, and and just kind of became more aware of it at a later age. But in terms of my younger upbringing, I can't recall anything or being too interested. In my late teenage years, when I started to realize the importance of trying to understand these stories, I became more involved in the community. I started volunteering at the campus here and various organizations like Fulkarama. I went on Birthright. I was a chaperone at this Asper Foundation sponsored trip to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. So I did feel a need to actively seek out various means to continue to pass on these stories and to understand them on a different level. And I think it's important, extremely important. And I feel I want to raise my kids Jewish. It's important for me to marry someone that's Jewish, and that I don't think that'll ever change. It's part of who I am, and it's part of what I want to pass on to the next generation.
My name is Joe Riesen, Chair of the Holocaust Awareness Committee. Obviously, it affected my education. It affected my system. I developed a nervous system. I was very skinny. And that bothered me a lot. And I was a big worrier, especially when I started in business. I worried if I'm going to be successful or not. See, when I started up from nothing, I had to borrow money, and I had nothing. And so I was worried, am I going to be successful, and so on. But I was very aggressive and challenge. I like to challenge. And if a customer complained, I was worrying. If something didn't go right, I was worrying. And it got really, really bad situation. I went to doctors. There's nothing they could do for me, Till finally one doctor settled me down. I'll never forget his name, Dr. Thorgerson. He just put up a clinic, And he took me into his room. He was a very kind person. He says, you have to calm down and accept, and eventually this will go away.
More than 60 years have passed since the end of World War II, yet the conversations and stories of Holocaust survivors are vivid memories. The recollections of survivors are startlingly detailed.
Now it's coming back more now than during the time when I was busy, raising a family and so on. I made a promise, when I retire, I'm going to give something back to the community, whether it's financial, help out charities, and do these presentations, in schools with children, and I'm involved with synagogues, blah, blah, blah. So I'm involved quite a bit to keep me occupied. But this is what's been happening, you see. I think about it more now than I did in my younger years.
He was very reluctant to tell me certain stories. I tried to, etch it out of him, but it's tough at times, and I still haven't gotten the full story. I have more of the general, superficial story that he tells people, and it's hard to really uncover those deeper secrets or those deeper feelings that have really happened. Unlike my father's Zeta, who actually experienced the death camps itself, my mom's Zeta, Joe, he was hidden, and so all his family came with him back to Canada. So in terms of the great feeling of loss, it was there for maybe loss for his old country and the way life was. But in terms of family loss, there wasn't a lot of that. It's an honor and privilege, and it's worth talking about in the future to my children, and I want those stories to be passed on. That's important to me, because let's face it, in my lifetime, all the Holocaust survivors will have passed away. And so there needs to be some sort of means of communication to pass on these stories to make sure that they're still alive.
We are always close with many of the survivors. That was our social group and our family, Joe's parents. So in conversation, it came up many times about what they had gone through. And the children had heard, but they weren't aware of what was really discussed. And then as they grew older, I start to tell them a little bit about what their father had experienced. And they wanted to know more, and gradually I pulled him into the conversation. He was very reluctant at first. Then as they became teenagers, and he became involved with the Holocaust here, he started to speak publicly with children, and our son became more aware, and he sat in on some of the lectures and heard about it. And in time, they really became totally aware of then we wrote out his story, and they became very knowledgeable about it too.
My mom, as far as I understand it, and Jeff Riesen, I'm not sure if you've met him, who's the son, my mom's brother. All the siblings, I think they went through the same kind of thing. Seeing firsthand my Zeta's trauma and how he was trying to grapple with what he was feeling. So I think even though the two sets of grandparents had different experiences, I think that living in those households would have been the same from an emotional standpoint. Whether you're hiding or living right next to the possibility of death, there's still that feeling inside. I think that still warrants trying to stay alive, and you never know when an officer will come knocking on your door, and when we're confronted with certain situations, we're willing to take any step to come out alive and safe, or give us at least peace of mind that we will, whether that's denial or running a marathon at full speed to try to get away from an attacker of some sorts.
Yeah. Unto every person there is a name, by Zelda. Unto every person there is a name, bestowed on him by God, and given to him by his parents. Unto every person there is a name, accorded him by his stature and type of smile and style of dress.
Unto every person there is a name, conferred by the mountains and the walls which surround him. Unto every person there is a name, granted him by the fortune's will, of that which neighbors call him.
Unto every person there is a name assigned him by his failings, or contributed by his yearnings. Unto every person there is a name given him by his enemies, or by his love.
Unto every person there is a name, derived from his celebrations and his occupation. Unto every person there is a name, presented him by the seasons and his blindness.
Unto every person there is a name, which he receives from the sea, and is given to him by his death.
So once we established ourselves in Canada, you see, and my parents were communicating with them and helping them out whatever they could. And once they passed on, myself, I should say, my wife has the most, she does all the communicating, the writing and arranging and whatever, whether it's parcels or money. And then the parents passed away. Was it before passed away? Right, but my father is still alive, thank you. They were still alive, so I said, well, let's not ignore this and let's do something about the property. See, we don't want it, we're not going to go down and claim it. So let's go to a lawyer and document everything and writing and legally and transfer it to them, and you have it and do whatever you want. So we send out, affidavit and everything, and within 2-3 weeks, we get a big manila envelope, with all the documents back and a letter with it says they appreciate, thank us very much what you're trying to do for us. We cannot accept it. The reason is, if the people in the village there will find out that we are going to claim this property and own it, they'll stone us to death. The only thing we do help now, we used to send parcels, a lot of parcels. But then it's difficult. It's costly here. It's costly the shipping. And we don't know if they can use it or not to use it, So I said, you know what?
They never asked for anything.
They never asked. We always ask him, please. At the time, when she was alive, certain medicines, was expensive. We used to send money on ourselves, 2-3 times a year.
Yeah.
So we felt, why have the burden on myself? I have family. I have 2 sisters and nephews and nieces. And after all, if not us, this would not expand the family, you see. So we came up with an idea. I says, this happened when she passed away. She was getting that pension. It wasn't much, $40, $50 US a month, but to them it's a lot of money. Yeah. If you divide it by 3, so that's it's 120 zlotys a month. So after she passed away, that's gone. They had to report it. She's not alive. So they felt I felt it. But she mentioned in the letter, it says, I hope you don't forget us. And I felt it says, I cannot do that, forget it. Because she passed away, that means there's no more contact, you see. And yet there's still a big family there. So we decided, my wife and I said, you know what, let's get the whole family involved here. And provide each one $100 a year. There was 13 of us, that's $1,300. And we sent them for Christmas, half of it, and half of it we just sent here before the Easter.
I have to tell you, I came from I had a very strong Yiddish background, and as a young child, when we were going to Jewish school, it was during the war years, and of course we were being told what was going on in Europe, the slaughter, and I have a friend who's in the same situation. We both went through it, and so when before Joe arrived there, the young orphans started to come in 1947 and 48. So my friend and I became involved with the old YMHA and was trying to help these kids and communicate. And we befriended them, and so I was ready for this situation.
Unfortunately, there's many small details that I won't be able to pass on, and I think it's those small details that are more important than the general story.
Told you he never intended to go back. He had very bad feelings about the country, as most of them do. But what happened is one day, about 1999, we received in the mail from the Holocaust Museum in Washington this letter telling us that there was somebody looking for Joe who had found his name in the archives and wanted to contact him. And they, of course, will not give out the address, but they allow the person to send his letter, to write out a letter, which they mail to you. And if you don't want to respond, you don't have to. The letter stated that this was a young man from Argentina who claimed, he got his facts a little mixed up, but he claimed that one of his relatives, a grandfather, came from the same town, Markova, and they believed that it was a cousin to Joe's mother. And he would like to make contact with us. Well, his information was a little wrong because he thought it was the father who was related. But anyway, I wrote out the whole history of the family, just saying we would love to have found new family, new relatives, but I think you've made a mistake because it was the mother who was the Rubenfeld. That was the name he gave. That was her maiden name, and she came from Markova. And the father was not from that town. He came from another town, and they met, and that's how they married. Well, I sent this letter out, and it took about a month. I didn't hear from them, so I almost forgot about it. One day, this huge manila envelope comes to us, and in it is photocopies of letters that his mother had written in 1948 to his grandfather in Argentina, with the postmark on the envelopes, with the old addresses where they lived. And of course, I read Yiddish, so I could read it and understand it. And she told him about coming to Canada and having arrived and struggling and everything, and that the family was all and they were corresponding. The second letter stated reply to his last letter, and she wants to let him know that her son became engaged to a Jewish girl, a Canadian girl, which me. She wanted to share that with him, and of course other things in the family. And this was proof positive that this was the relationship, which she never had mentioned. She had never told us about it. I think the reason for it was because he had stopped writing this cousin. He might have thought that she was looking for a handout. He stopped corresponding, and I think she was hurt and angry because we went to Argentina at one point, and she never told us about this family, and we didn't know anything about them. Well, of course, we were so delighted, and we immediately wrote back that, yes, this is authenticated, this is the true relation, and we would love to meet them. So this is the son now who we're talking about. His father is the cousin because his grandfather passed away already. He came down to Florida to meet us with his wife, and our son from Toronto came with his family. And it was the most wonderful reunion, the most beautiful people you could hope to meet, warm-hearted and loving. And we made this contact, and immediately he started to tell Joe that he wants to go back to Poland to revisit his grandfather's roots. His grandfather came to Argentina in the 30s, and of course he knew his story, where he came from, and he was a very intelligent young man. Would Joe go with him? Of course he balked at first, said he had no intention to go. Our son Ron started to convince him, Dad, if you go, I'll go with you and we'll be all right. His parents wanted to go. And I said, I'll go along. And slowly we broke down his resistance, and he finally agreed. And we arranged, 7 of us arranged to go. Now, these are Spanish-speaking people. My son arranged for all kinds of guides, Spanish and English-speaking, and the buses, and just everything necessary. And we chose that was suitable for them, and we arranged to meet. We met in Amsterdam because that was our route took us there. They came, and from there we all traveled to Poland together. And the first time we met this real cousin, and we ended up in Poland.
It was worthwhile, and
every moment was so precious. It was just
memory.
Yeah. And they interviewed him on the train. He also had the camera.
Oh, yeah, that's what
he interviewed him, and he showed it in Argentina because he also is very active in the Holocaust. He is the president of the Holocaust organization there, and his parents are the most wonderful, darling people. They're coming to visit us this summer here. He set up a website, and the whole story is on there, and that's how people find us, because we've had inquiries over the years from people who found the website, and just recently a woman from Israel who is looking for her, trying to do a family tree, and she thinks her grandfather came from Markova, and we had the picture there of the school picture. She asked maybe he could identify. Well, he couldn't remember, of course.
My family was affected by the Holocaust. My grandfather went through it. My grandma, she went to Auschwitz. My great aunt, my whole family was killed.
לכל איש יש שם שנתן לו אלוהים, ונתנו לו אביו ואמו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו קומתו ואופן חיוכו, ונתן לו הארי. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו ההרים, ונתנו לו כתליו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו המזלות, ונתנו לו שכניו. לכל איש יש שם, לכל איש יש שם. נתנו לו חטאיו, ונתנה לו כמיהתו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו שונאיו, ונתנה לו אהבתו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו חגיו, ונתנה לו מלאכתו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו תקופות השנה, ונתן לו עברונו. לכל איש יש שם, לכל איש יש שם. לכל איש יש שם שנתן לו אלוהים, ונתנו לו אביו ואמו. לכל איש יש שם שנתן לו הים, ונתן לו מותו.
28th of June, 1939, I left Germany on the Kindertransport to England. I was 7 years old at that time. And as I have told many times, I remember my mother and father taking me to the station, railway station. Now, family were not allowed onto the platform unless somebody was taking you to another train, which in my case, I had to go to another city to catch the train that took us through to Holland. I always remember my mother's standing outside of the railway station, holding onto the railing and looking through. Now, I don't remember whether she was crying or what. I just remember seeing her face. Little did I realize at that time that would be the last time I would see my parents.